Have you ever felt like you were in a simulation? Tonight, we go over 12 stories of 12 different individuals who have their own simulation story. This is 12 stories of glitches in the Matrix. Story 1. 2 Wives. One time, my wife and I were coming back from a dinner night out. When I opened the door of the house, she was sitting at the computer working, as I usually find her when I get home. Nothing too unusual, except she was entering the house with me. I shrugged it off and carried on. We went to bed and I told her that I saw her sitting at the computer, and she goes dead serious and told me that when I opened the door, she also saw herself sitting at the computer working. The creepiest thing I have ever experienced. The fact that our neighbor's 2-year-old daughter used to point to the TV when it was off and tell us that the person on the screen was making scary faces and that she wanted it to go away didn't help us get much sleep that night either. Story 2. The Creepy Driver. We have a breakfast laid on at work every morning. Just a simple buffet of eggs, bacon, and what have you. Nothing huge, and it's really only to feed about a dozen people or so. I'm usually one of the first guys from the team to get to work, and the kitchen was deserted as usual. I walked into the little kitchen, and there was a ceramic egg tray thing with 12 eggs in it, like the bottom half of an egg carton with a socket for each egg. All spaces are filled with warm, freshly boiled eggs. I take one, walk over to the garbage bin, shuck the shell, and then I walk back over to the food and stop dead in my tracks. There are 12 eggs in the tray again. No one entered the room while I was peeling the thing. I touched the mystery egg. It was the same temp as the other eggs around it. Not a big thing, nothing major, but something very strange. Given one does not get presented with strange eggs from a parallel universe every day, I peeled and ate that one too. Story 3. Losing time. A dude was in the car with a couple of friends heading back from a road trip. His parents called to see how far away he was, and he told them it'd be about 25 minutes. Shortly thereafter, he came around a bend and saw a full moon, which was reflected in the lake below. The road ahead was completely empty, with not a single car in sight. Then suddenly, everything went pitch black for a moment. No dashboard lighting, no headlights on the road. The music even stopped playing. Then, the music was back, playing the CD from the beginning, and there was now a vehicle being pulled over by a cop a quarter-mile ahead, though it hadn't even been there a split second earlier. He assumed that he'd fallen asleep momentarily, but after a few moments, the driver of the car exclaimed that he thought he had just fallen asleep as well. They shared the experience, and more concerning was the clock, which was reading an hour later than it had a bit earlier. To avoid freaking out, they convinced themselves that the car must have had an electrical failure that reset the clock and whatnot. But when they arrived at his house 25 minutes later, he was an hour late. To this day, he has no idea what the explanation is for that brief blackout and missing hour. Story 4. A Second Life. One man recalls working as a vendor at a fish market. One morning he woke up, got dressed, got tea, and went to the docks, bought some fish, and did his entire routine before selling fish all day. He spoke with friends, smoked cigarettes, counted his money, paid his stall rent, went home, ate dinner, relaxed, and went to bed. The next morning he woke up ready to go back to the docks for fresh fish. Only things were different. He was in bed next to his wife, and it was Saturday, so he didn't have to work. It was all a dream. He's a married man who has never worked in a fish market, yet somehow he experienced life as some single fish vendor in an entirely different life, with no idea how it happened. Story 5. The Doll. Someone recalls their dad having a little toy monkey that he used to teasingly say was his favorite child. It was an ongoing joke, and this person and their siblings would always try to steal the monkey, playing into it. One day, they got a hold of the monkey and drew all over it with a Sharpie, and then threw it in the garbage. They laughed when their dad searched for it, but he gave up when he figured out they'd thrown it out. A few years later, Now 17 years old, this person was walking down the street in Toronto when they saw an orange object on the side of the road. They walked up to it, and it was the exact same toy monkey, black Sharpie lines and all. This person is still stunned, unable to figure out how this is possible when their garbage is sent to a local dump that's nowhere near Toronto. Story 6. The Woman with Roses. A guy was waiting to catch a train when a woman with glazed eyes asked him for money. She said that her brother was in the hospital and she wanted to buy him some flowers. Despite thinking that she might be a drug addict, he grudgingly gave her $5, certain that it would have been wasted on her habit. Eventually, his train pulls up and he gets on. As it's pulling away, he sees the woman through the glass asking other people for money to fund her roses. His train arrived at the station 15 minutes later. He walked to the bus stop, and right on time, his bus was arriving. He hopped on and read the paper for about 5 to 10 minutes. Then the bus made a routine stop. The doors opened, and can you guess who walked on? None other than the woman from earlier, with a dozen roses in her hand. She looked him right in the eye as she passed by to take a seat. He was stunned, unsure how it was possible that she had time to get flowers and arrive there when he caught the train before her, and saw her as he pulled away, then caught the first and only bus going in that particular direction. The mystery went unsolved with no practical explanation. Story 7. Dreams of Warning. A guy had 2 intense dreams in the same night. The first was about his online friends calling him to discuss her breakup, in which he sang some lines from Don't Cry by Seal to her. His second dream was about finding one of his real-life friends dead, floating in the bathtub. The next evening, he logged online and his online friend messaged him saying that she and her boyfriend broke up. He immediately wondered if this meant something. Then he got a call from his real-life friend, and though they barely spoke on a regular basis, he was freaked out. They chatted about school and whatnot. Then he heard a splash in the background and asked if she was in the bathtub. When she said yes, he was stunned. He asked her, "What did you do?" And she hesitated before revealing that she'd taken pills, eaten mushrooms, and drank vodka. She'd gotten scared, waiting for it to hit her, so she'd called him for the comfort of hearing someone's voice. He called 911 on her behalf, and when help arrived, she was unconscious, but alive. According to the man, she's doing great today. He still has no idea how to explain those dreams telling the future. Story 8. The Man at the Bench. Every morning on his way to work, a man would pass through a shopping mall, and on one of the benches he saw an elderly man who appeared to be waiting for someone. He was a fairly normal-looking guy, though he sometimes wore a piece of attire that wasn't particularly stylish, like a golfer's cap, logger boots, or even a vest. Every morning for 4 years he'd seen this man, but he never actually witnessed him meeting anyone. Then he got a new job located on a completely different part of town. Only a few days into working, he walked out of the subway and to his surprise, he saw the exact same guy sitting on the bench. Story 9. The Woman with Black Hair. When I was around 20, a few years ago, I kept having dreams about a woman with long black hair named Aurora. There were different dreams, but for some reason, her distinct face and name would always keep ending up in my dreams. It got to the point to where I would wake up frustrated and confused, trying to Google her name or find out how I was connected to her. After a few months, she stopped showing up, and I dismissed it, thinking my brain was just being a scumbag. Fast forward a few years later, Halloween 2009, I'm in the car with a friend, stopped at a gas station. I'm about to pull out and merge onto a highway when I get a phone call from a random number. So I stopped the car, but no one answered. There was a person behind me who grew impatient, honked at me, and then swerved in front of me instead of waiting for 2 seconds for me to move. The second they get on the highway, some silver Civic loses control of their wheel and crashes into the car that swerved in front of me. I called the cops and waited at the gas station for them to come. Turns out the drivers of both cars died. It 100% would have been me if I hadn't gotten that phone call. I called it back a few hours later out of gratitude and curiosity. It rang 3 times and went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Aurora. Please leave your name and number. Never had goosebumps like that in my life. I called it again the next day because I was confused about the whole situation. A woman answers and we get to talking. I tell her my entire story, including the dreams I had. She tells me she doesn't know how I got her number and that she never called me as far as she remembers. Weird. I ask her if she has a Facebook to confirm if she is in fact the woman in my dreams. I check her Facebook, and it's totally her. If that's not a glitch in the Matrix, then I am crazy. Story 10. A Parallel Universe. This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, "Hey, it's me. Kill all extremists. Sorry I missed you. Call you later. Bye." And then I hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day, he called back and says, "Wow, that was quite a message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl." Well, as it turns out, the message didn't end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times. After my initial message that I left, I did leave, there was a slight pause, and it continues on for another 30 to 40 seconds or so, with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had, with a girl whose voice I didn't recognize. You can compare it to the message I know I did leave, and the two voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice, but, talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation, I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then, the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that recorded the messages to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and had analyzed, unfortunately. Also, neither I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky, and I have no explanation. Story 11. The Storm. Driving home on a storm day, I see that a side road up to the local golf course is blocked off by flashing barricades. I also spy a Mercedes parked past the barricades with its hazards on. I stop and walk up to the car to see if they need any help, since I am an EMT. I shine my light in the back seat to see a man slumped over, apparently asleep. Thinking I've got a few drunks, I move up to the driver window and rap on the glass and shine my light in. The driver is sitting bolt upright, unmoving, staring straight ahead. My window rapping or light doesn't cause him to blink, flinch, or move. I look over and the passenger is slumped forward onto the dash. This begins to creep me out. I call down to the sheriff's station and request a code 2, which is no lights and sirens unit, up to my location to help me check them out, since the doors are locked. While on my phone, I walk back to my truck to get my go bag. As I'm on the phone with dispatch, she asks me to get the license plate number for the car, just as a PG&E power company cherry picker truck comes rumbling down from the closed road. I move to go around the truck to get the plate number, and the car is gone. I talked to the driver of the truck, and he said there was an 80-foot tree down across the road, and that he didn't think it'd be open for a day or so. So the question is, the hell did the car go? Tree up one way, barricades down the other. It's kept me a bit unsettled when stopping at accidents and hazards since then. Story 12. This happened to me in 3rd grade, and it scared me so much I started crying and had to go to the office to talk to the principal about it. I was in the hallway for misbehaving, and my neighbor, Tad, who was a year younger than me, came walking out of class to my right and passed in front of me and headed down some stairs. We said hi to each other. About 20 seconds later, he walked out of the same class, passed in front of me, and headed down the stairs. I just stared at him, confused and afraid, and he looked back at me like, "Why are you looking at me like that?" I never realized how much it was like Matrix deja vu.